this is Christina Barr. You're watching Black Tea News. Hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today we're going to be talking about a bit about the SCOTUS hearing. They heard oral arguments on Trump getting kicked off the Colorado ballot, and it didn't sound like it went great for Colorado. And from the commentary I'm hearing from CBS and other different legal analysts in the media, people are expecting that this could be like a 9-0 ruling in Trump's favor. I don't see how. I mean, everyone thought that obviously the court would side with Trump. The ruling itself was like, this isn't really going to go into effect until there's some kind of like hearing about it, maybe because they knew it was bunk, I guess, when they put it out there. But we'll listen to a little bit of the some of the oral arguments because I think that's dead in the water. Even like the liberal justices were saying things that basically would tank the case. Also, I saw this clip that Republicans shared of this Democrat from Missouri that was saying that they need to give vasectomies to men, which people say that all the time. People don't always say it who hold some kind of elected power. It's not the first time I guess I've heard that, but I think that is so weird. I mean, they want to just be like, oh, you want to control women's bodies here, therefore we want to control men here, just kind of like a petty taste of your own medicine, but it's not comparable. We'll talk about that. There's another thing that pro-choice people who don't really love abortion, but will also say, like, sometimes they'll say like, well, they can have an abortion, but if they have too many, I think, or if they have one, then we should sterilize them. I'm like, y'all don't have the courage to say, hey, we should not have abortions, but y'all will be like, oh, but we should forcefully sterilize people. Like, that's very strange to me. So we'll talk about that, as well as Sunny from The View. She found out some interesting information about her family history, which is the history of lots of people that they are the descendants of slave owners, but she's still saying that she wants reparations and stuff. So I want to play the clip from the clips that are going around anyway and discuss that. But before we jump into everything, I want to encourage you guys to go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website for articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com because it does cost to stream and run my website, all that stuff. And so if you can support, I appreciate it. If you're watching on Facebook, you guys can send stars. If you're watching on YouTube, you guys can send super chats. Or if you're watching later, you guys can send super thanks as well. Checking out different content, different merch on the website, that does help as well. If you want to go ahead and get something from this site. I do also write books. You can find out more information on blacktnews.com. There's a link that'll take you to my book website right on the merchandise page, but you guys can search Christina L. Barr right on the website. I'm getting a little feedback with my microphone situation. I think something's maybe up with the USB cord. So if there's some issues with my mic, please let me know in the comments. It sounds okay to me, other than like there was like some static here and there. So just let me know if there's an issue. Other than that, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Oh, someone left a comment. Don't hear anything. Okay. All right. Well, just keep me updated. Let's jump into the Sunny story first. Now, Sunny, I'm not too fond of Sunny. Sunny says some racial things quite often. She's very, a lot of people on the left, they'll say things in condemning racist stuff that they see on the right or claim that they see on the right, and they'll want to stand up for minorities and other stuff like that. But on the flip side, they'll say things that are kind of racist and stuff of the whole, or they'll push things that are pretty racial. So a lot of times these social justice warriors, they'll say and they'll do things, they'll be so focused on race, but then they'll be the ones, I don't know, they'll become the monsters themselves in a way. Like she got blasted, and I mentioned in this article that I wrote about Nikki Haley and some of the racial remarks people are making about her. Like she called out Nikki Haley for changing her name and not using her birth name, which Nikki is her birth name. It's her middle name. And she doesn't go by her birth last name because she's married to a man whose last name is Haley. So it's really not so strange that she calls herself Nikki Haley. And so Sunny was, talking about, oh, she's a chameleon, some of it, not all of us can be chameleons, etc. Blah, blah, blah. So she got called out even by her co-host really quickly. And they're like, Sunny, you don't use you go by like a different name. Sunny's not her birth name. And the other people on the stage don't go by their names. Like Whoopi Goldberg, for example, her name is like Karen something. But so coming at Nikki Haley, that is like the weirdest thing when people do it. And people on the right and the left have both resorted to that. But that's just an example. I mean, she'll talk about Black Republicans and say they're oxymoron and other kind of different stuff. So she's quite racial herself, but she's been a proponent of things like reparations and so on. And so she found out something about her family history. She was on the PBS show Exploring Ancestry and stuff. And so, which is nice that they have this show, because I don't know if it was the same show or if it was like a different show with same kind of concept, because they got canceled after Ben Affleck went on the show, and he didn't like the fact that he learned that his ancestors were slave owners. He had some pretty heroic, nice feats in his family ancestry, but he didn't like that. So he wanted that suppressed. And so they did suppress that. And then it ended up coming out in some kind of big leak. I think it was the Sony leak or whatever. And so it came out that show is basically compromised. So if people go on a TV show to find out their family ancestry, and the celebrities can be like, hey, I didn't like that juicy bit because it's embarrassing to me or whatever. So can we take that out? It compromises the show, which is so interesting that people take that he took it so personally, or was so upset by that he wanted it squashed, because it's not like you did the thing. It's not like you're the one who enslaved anyone. You're not responsible for the sins of your ancestors. But so keep that in mind, because there's a lot of people who do think that certain people are responsible for the sins of their ancestors for things that they did not commit. And that's one of the things there with you could say with reparations. And that whole argument, because it's like, well, who's going to pay for that? And you say, well, the country will pay for that. Okay, but the country doesn't make money. They take money from your tax. They tax it. They get it from you. So who's not paying? Who's paying for it? Kind of seems like everyone is paying for it, unless you're a person who doesn't pay taxes, which a lot of people I saw on TikTok are complaining because they're paying taxes for the first time they owe. So they're flipping out because they have to pay a couple $100s and stuff. But who likes paying taxes? But sooner or later, they're going to get you in one way or another. So who's paying? Who's paying? So, why, and people who had nothing to do with it, who had anything to really do with it nowadays, but especially like people who came over afterwards, like, why should they have to pay into paying for reparations? So I proposed something some time ago about reparations. I'm like, if people want reparations, then the people who want reparations should pay for the reparations. They should pay for the reparations. And we really shouldn't do it by like, you shouldn't pay for the sins of your father or something like that. But if we were going to associate it, I don't know, by ideology rather, there's one major party that did support slavery that's still around. So, and then there's one major party that kind of wants the reparations. So if Democrats want reparations, they should just pay the reparations. They should just pay the reparations to, I guess, the descendants of slaves who are not Democrats. And maybe that's more financially feasible because that's a small number of people who are black in the country, descendants of slaves who are not identifying as a Democrat. So if Sunny would like to write me a check or something, I would hate to refuse her. I'd hate to refuse her if that's what she would really like to do. But anyway, let's watch this first clip. It's not too long. Hopefully it doesn't I don't think that YouTube would knock the stream out for these small clips, but hopefully I don't get dinged on them anyway and have to appeal and so on and so forth. But one second while I share my screen. This is an interesting show, and everyone has an interesting family history, especially in America. So it is what it is.
Wow. I'm a little bit in shock. I just always thought of myself as Puerto Rican, half Puerto Rican. I didn't think I was my family was originally from Spain and slaveholders.
Yeah. So how are you feeling, my friend?
I think it's actually pretty interesting that my husband and I have shared roots.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate that. And I think it's great for our children to know this information. I guess it's a fact of life that this is how some people made their living, on the backs of others.
Yeah, that's true. It's family history, or not everyone's family history, but a lot of people's family history. It's American history. It's just it's world history. It's not anything unique to America in the least bit. I saw, this is on topic, but a little left field. There's a video that I saw on TikTok of this girl who's watching Avatar: The Last Airbender for the first time through, I guess. And so she noted, if you don't know the story really quick, there's these 4 nations that live in harmony who, they practice bending of the elements. It's air, earth, water, fire. And so one day the Fire Nation attacked, and there's one person who can master all the elements, and that's the Avatar. And so she noted that the Fire Nation, she's like, has anyone noticed that they're paler than everyone else, and brought up colonization and other kind of stuff like that. And people responded to her, and I was going to do a separate video, but it's not because it's like a world that's Asian, just pretty much Asian. It's inspired by it's an Americanized kind of anime, but it's not an anime. And there are people in her comments the Fire Nation is based off of Imperial Japan. They're not supposed to be European Western white folks or something that when colonized the world. Japan was quite a terror back in the day before they got all cute with their anime, and then even she would even respond to people yeah, well, there's still some colorism aspect there. And then I'm like, I watched the show. What colorism? You're lying. People are so caught up in this idea of white people, Westerners, colonization bad. And I'm like, you don't think colonization is just the way of the world, how things worked? You're going to tell me that Muslim empires didn't colonize folks? Those brown people? Come on, let's be real. Geez. So anyway, let's look at sorry for the long delay to get to Sunny's response, but it just popped in my head and I wanted to share. So she talked a bit about it on The View. So let's watch that response.
At first, I was deeply disappointed.
The slave thing is a bummer.
It's a bummer. I still believe in reparations, by the way, so y'all can stop texting me and emailing me and saying that I'm a white girl and that I don't deserve reparations. I still believe that.
Someone did that to you?
Yes.
I don't know who sent her a thing telling her she was a white girl.
Okay, it's too much, people.
clean off your television screen.
Yeah, that's a lot. So I still believe in reparations. I still believe this country has a lot to do in terms of racial justice. But what I will say, Sarah, to your question is that I feel that I'm enriched by knowing that history.
Yeah.
I'm enriched, and I'm enriched by knowing that my family has come so far from being enslavers to my mother marrying my father in 1968.
Well,
So that, and that's a nice way to look at that, and to look at dark things in the past of mistakes that people made, immoral choices that people made in mass, believing bad things, and that people change. But that's a way to look at America, not just your family history. It's specifically that a lot of people did a lot of bad things, and we've come a very long way in that regard. But Sunny does not always act a way that I would say is appropriate and moral and not racist. So I think she still morally has a bit of a ways to go herself. But yeah, America, it's complicated, it's messy, it's very fascinating, very interesting. But that is a story of the world, the whole entire world. It's not a uniquely American thing, but for we did inherit the practice of slavery, became a new nation, and it's a blight on our history, but it's something that we did abolish, and we've made strides. The things that people go through today are not like things that my parents went through, and their parents went through, and their parents, obviously. Well, I say obviously, but it seems like some people don't get that, or don't believe that. They believe that struggles through their struggle, and like they have the welts on their back. You don't. You don't. You didn't pay that price. You didn't suffer that pain. So many people appropriate that pain from their ancestors past, and it's just too much. But that's one of the reasons why I don't like the whole reparations thing. I'm like, why do you deserve it? Like that's a question. Like, is it just about collective punishment? Because I think there's a good case to make, like, why do you deserve it? Why do you deserve it? And then there's a question of so many people whose families are intermingled with people who obviously own slaves. So it's like, are you like writing a check in one hand and slipping it over to the other and being like, I have settled the matter? What do you do? Are you just like, oh well, I can't help that white in my genetics because it was they might have sexually assaulted the slaves, or they might have you could say power dynamics, even if you think it was a consensual relationship. Okay, that's for the black side, but that's still, what about the white people who did the thing? Why are you not, if white people are guilty for the white evil in the world, why aren't you at least half guilty for that half of yourself? So I don't, there's a lot of things about the reparation argument, like who pays, why is there this collective punishment, on who how could we even afford it, that people ask. So as I already said, if people want reparations, like Sunny knows that she's a descendant of slaves, and she could start finding out who her family wronged, and just start writing out as many checks as possible to the descendants, if that's how she feels. And if she feels that way, in the US too, again, she stomps for the party that believed in, slavery pretty firmly. So she's more than welcome to sign a check made out to me and send it to me. I won't refuse it. I will take it. I will take that for her to soften her white guilt. I will do that if she needs me to do that. And I think she needs me to do that. So Sonny can always send me that check. Yeah, again, our history is complicated. everyone's history is complicated. Speaking of complicated history, I maybe we'll talk about this more tomorrow. But I was just doing some reading and I stumbled upon something that's going on in Virginia, and there's a nonprofit that takes care of the houses of like Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson and some other stuff. And so they are, and this is, I think it's already going up to like Youngkin's desk, Glenn Youngkin, the governor's desk, and he'll have to veto it at this point if he even does that. But there was this kid in high school who heard about this group, and she wanted them to be defunded because she didn't like their history and so on. And so she started like lobbying different legislators and stuff. And so they wanted to remove like tax status, like a special kind of status, I guess they had on something with real estate. And I guess fair enough if you don't want them to have a special thing. But then there was like another thing that they wrote to get rid of their tax exemption status that other similar groups have. So now they're carving them out as like a special punishment because they want them to lose their exempt status on this stuff, so they'd have to pay like a huge amount of money on these different properties, which they hope will eventually make them, I guess, lose those properties and not being able to take care of them. And as I said, history is complicated, and people were tearing down different monuments. Like, I understand people wanted to take down the flags and other stuff like that. I don't get the love for the Confederate flag at all. Like, I can understand I've heard people make arguments about it not being racist and other things like that. I can take you at your word. I don't get the pride. I'm like, you lost, I guess. I don't know. I don't understand it. And I just can't square that circle, I guess. But people have deep affection and stuff. I understand people wanting it taking it down, what Nikki Haley did in South Carolina, etc. Blah blah blah. I get that, but the way that people are trying to just tear down so many different things. You want to like get rid of a house, some houses. I was watching a video the other night. Granted, I wasn't looking at like Robert E. Lee's. It was actually like Lincoln's house, and I was watching a tour online. I'm like, that would be probably need to go through, and I like history, particularly of the American Civil War. Well, I guess all history pretty much fascinates me, but I write a series that's like in that era, and so when I read that story, I'm like, if people go there for like tourism and to see that stuff, and you're saying it serves like no historical benefit to keep that kind of stuff around. It is our history. It's our history. There's so many people that get mad and like Republicans are trying to erase history. They don't want to talk about slavery. And people are out here literally trying to erase history or destroy it, rather, at least. So I don't get that. Either we need to appreciate it, as in understand and learn from it, or not. And I think we should understand and appreciate and learn from it, period. So when people are like, oh, Republicans don't want to talk about slavery and history, I'm like, no, we like talking about that stuff. We're the party who freed the slaves. So yeah, sure, we like talking about it. And it's amazing how many people there's a one viral video of someone like asking people, they're in the Lincoln Memorial, like asking different not at the Lincoln Monument, asking questions about Lincoln and the Republic, like who freed the slaves, whose party freed the slaves, what party was Abraham Lincoln, and people don't know that he's a Republican. And it's just pretty wild how many people don't know history. It's like, it's just a talking point of we need to protect our history, etc. Blah blah blah. All they want to do is harp on like the negativity of the past, but I don't know. It's so bizarre. Like there's one person who I started running into their content earlier this week, and she's a Black historian. She's has a pretty big following on YouTube and TikTok, and she she did a video talking about how she's sick of seeing movies where they like really focus on the trauma of slavery, and people were coming at her and made a crack like, oh, I'm sure Ron DeSantis would like that, which is a dig on Ron DeSantis and his bill. Well, not his bill, but the different requirements of teaching history, the African American history, and they said that slaves learned skills, which they did. It's just you could feel however you feel about it, but they did learn skills and then go on to use them after they got out of slavery. Not that makes slavery good. That's not the context. It's just a fact of life. But people got so mad when that whole thing popped off. So now they're using Ron DeSantis as a slur against this Black woman, and she's not on the right, by the way. I watched a couple of her stuff. I wasn't like overly like left wing or something, but I don't know if she watched my stuff and enjoy my content. So, but I thought her stuff was pretty fascinating. And so she replied to them and, gave a really eloquent sort of speech response to them about there's moments beyond watching someone be whipped. And she's like, what about those moments when they woke up in the morning with their children, when they sang with their children, the romances that they would find in the midst of their struggles? Like show some more things that show the humanity of these people, their strength, their character, their resilience, not just, watching something like 12 Years a Slave is based off actual like events and stuff, but like stuff more than just Lupita getting the crap beaten out of her every day. So I understood what she was saying. I'm like, that's a good point. Like even a video she did, the first video I saw her do, she was talking about the slave woman who would help the mistress of the house and the different duties and stuff that she would have. And she had like a moment, like different moments in the video where she was like sit downstairs talking to the cook and they're like waiting and making faces like on these white people to hurry up. And I just thought there was like humor and stuff in that moment, because I'm like, people don't change. Like there's probably still like something, like there's different circumstances in history that'll be whatever, but like different like mannerisms or whatever. It just made me laugh. And because I'm like, I wonder what kind of conversations they had, hush hush. And I'm like, that's kind of interesting. So I understood her take, but people got angry at her because it's like they only expect us to focus on this rich darkness and nothing else when we have these conversations. So I don't get it. And I really don't get it because it's not like we don't do evil stuff today. Like we have such a terrible view of the past, and we should like look at that with righteous judgment, right? But I mean, like everyone who watches my content probably can guess I'm about to say abortion, like right, staring you in the face about how we dehumanize people and say it's okay to kill babies. So by the millions every year. Well, about 1 million every year. It's not in the millions. In the US. I mean, it's a global thing that happens. So just check yourself, man. Check. It's easy to point to the past and say they did a bad thing and ignore all the stuff that we have going on today. Anyway, let's move on since I mentioned the topic of abortion. Let's move into this video with the state legislator. We'll get to the Trump stuff. But State Senator Carla May. This is a really short snippet that I'll play that Missouri Freedom Caucus posted on Twitter or X, but talking about forced vasectomies. And this is not the first time I've heard people say this.
If it's good for the gander, it got to be good for the goose. Because the amendment I want to file is to say that every man age 14 and above should have a vasectomy. Then we won't have to worry about abortions. That's right. Because you're not going to stop people from having sex. It's like the dawn of time.
It's like the dawn of time. You're not going to stop people from having sex. So let's everybody 14 and up have a vasectomy. Now, of course, you probably didn't expect for something like that to pass or anything like that. But it's still amazing that people want to say those sorts of things to prove their point, make their point or whatever. And the point of people bringing up, hey, we should force men to get vasectomies is because they believe that women are being forced to carry the baby, etc., when they have the abortion and stuff. Now, I did write an article on my website about the narrative of forced or the false narrative of force, because that's even people who are pro-life sometimes accept that, like, oh, you're forcing women to do that. Like who's doing it? Like if a man forces you, which I actually do believe the context of the debate was around sexual assault and stuff. So I'm just putting that in there. But overall, like in general, who like if some no one forced you. And if they did force you, that is a crime. And that person who did force that needs to pay. And I actually got into a back and forth with someone. Actually, I guess I'm still in the back and forth. I couldn't reply to them because I started talking to you guys. But I asked the question, like, do you believe like that a rapist should be executed without any kind of due process? And they won't even answer, they said all criminals get due process. I'm like, okay, do you believe that a rapist should get the death penalty? And they won't answer the question. And because a lot of these people aren't actually for the death penalty unless you are the preborn. And it's wild to me that we as a society treat the rapist with more rights and dignity than the unborn. That really bothers me. I know a lot of people don't think of it that way, but they obviously get their day in court. They get a trial from their peers, all that stuff. They get convicted, and they're probably not going to get the death penalty, right? When it comes to a baby in any circumstance, because people will bring up sexual assault, but that most people want abortions beyond that for consensual relationships. There's people who argue that people should be able to do it up until the moment of birth, even though they'll say, well, no one, they'll claim no one really does that, but there are people who healthy women will abort healthy fetuses. That does happen. And then they'll still be like, well, it should still be their choice, even though they don't really want it to happen, but they'll still say it's their choice. So yes, you still think it should be legal to abort even in the third trimester. So if you believe it's for any situation, people bring up rape as a scapegoat a lot. And it's unnerving how we all kind of talk about it. But anyway, if you haven't read the article, I have two articles, I guess, that are relevant on this topic. One is there's an article called The Rapist Child. I'd recommend you guys read that on my website. And there's another one called The False Narrative of Force. But anyway, when you are pregnant with a baby, let's say 99% of the time, there was some kind of action that got the baby in there that was between you and your partner or whatever. The government didn't put the baby in there. I didn't put the baby in there. This is a natural biological process. People having such disdain for natural biological processes of women is a pretty sexist, misogynist kind of way to look at life, but whatever. People have, I don't know, just a revulsion toward nature, I guess, nowadays. So the baby is there, unless you're saying that it's the baby, the fetus itself, that's committing an act of force. They didn't, you know, they're not sticking you up with a gun saying, this is my womb now, I'm the captain now. The baby's not doing that. It's in your uterus because that you did some actions that turned the key of its existence that ended up with it there. And so the case with abortion is actually, do you have the right to kill this person, to terminate their life? And I would say no. But the thing about vasectomies is that's a prevention of the child being conceived, versus an abortion is you're talking about that human being who exists terminating their life. So they're not really in the same category. Vasectomies, if you're going to make that kind of comparison, it's like forced sterilization of women, not abortions. That's what it would be. And vasectomies, people keep mentioning it. I know men will go ahead and get them, but they're not always reversible. So it's very strange that people keep trying to push this. No, we should not force men to get vasectomies. And what you're just doing is continuously promoting a society of degeneracy, one where men can just use women as sex objects, and I guess vice versa as well. We should be encouraging responsibility and companionship and love when people take these actions. You can say that it sounds cheesy, but we need to refocus sex around family building and actual family planning and so on, and not just the casual hookup. Oh, dawn of time, we need vasectomies. Well, no, we should not go that route. I don't understand why people think, and I said this already, but the contrast to this, it's not contrast, but something else that people will say is that they don't like abortion. But if people do get abortions, I think if they get after a certain amount, maybe after 3, we should sterilize you, or after you get 1, you get sterilized or something. And it amazes me that people will say that. Technically, people say that are pro-choice, maybe, or they think they're kind of soft pro-life or ambivalent pro-life or whatever, like they don't like it, but they're like, but after that, to me, it's crazy that people would think that saying, no, you cannot actively kill someone is somehow worse, more invasive, more government authority or whatever, than saying we're going to force women to get sterilized after they reach a certain threshold of abortions, or if they have one, they have to get the sterilization. And I understand people are using it. At one point, I think if people say after multiple, you should get fixed, I guess, sterilized, they're saying, at some point it's too much. To me, that doesn't make sense, because if it's not a life, if it doesn't have value, what does it matter how many abortions they have? Why is it keeping you up at night? Either they have value and human beings are being killed, or they're not. And if they are being killed, why do you get like a 3 pass or something? Is it like a card that you fill out, a loyalty rewards program or something? Kill enough babies and you get yourself fixed. Like, why does it work like that? Why does it work like that? And I guess when people say that if you get 1, you should get sterilized, still a bad thing, but maybe they're saying it more as a deterrent. But it's still not right. Forced sterilization is not good. And that's something that we used to do in this country. Margaret Sanger, who's a founder of Planned Parenthood, supported the ruling of Buck v. Bell, that had people being sterilized. There's a woman who, I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember all the details of the case, but they ended up sterilizing her, saying that she was mentally incompetent or whatever, and that was reason enough why they should be able to do that. But the people who made that suggestion were the relatives of the people who had got her impregnated and stuff. But I'm trying to remember the exact details. It's called Buck versus Bell. I'm sorry, don't remember all the details, but it was shady. It was shady, and the founder of Planned Parenthood approved it. Eugenics used to be a big thing in this country. They wanted minorities to have less babies, and people who they deemed to be feeble-minded and other folks, and she fell into that. She fell into that category. So, I don't think that's the route that we should go back to. If you can find the courage to say men should be forced to get vasectomies or women should be sterilized, I don't understand why you can't say if you get pregnant, then you have to let nature take its natural course. And I know you don't want to be pregnant. Congratulations, you won't be in 9 months. Because that's how it works. There's no force. It's just nature's occurring. The goal of these people, but it's just a way to lash out at dudes. You're trying to control our bodies, so we want to do something to control your body. And obviously you guys won't go along with it, but it's just lashing out as a, I don't know, angry feminist or something. If you believe in bodily autonomy, why are you violating your ethics here? Why are you violating your ethics if you really believe that bodily autonomy is important? I don't think bodily autonomy gives you the right to unalive someone else, so I don't think abortion really qualifies. But if you believe that people should have a choice, you obviously should not argue and propose that we make an amendment that men should get fixed, forcefully fixed. Isn't it bad enough you have to register for the draft? You already make men do things with their body. The government already tells them what they have to do. There's already an unbalanced power structure there. The government tells us what to do with our bodies all the time, guys. Someone, let me just go to this. Since I already told you about this girl I'm arguing with. She had posted this thing with my responses. She does not want to answer the question about should rapists get the death penalty, but she believes ultimately it doesn't matter. I do want to I got a super chat, but it's a different question, so I'm gonna I do want to say thank you to Danielle, but I'll read that after I finish this thought. So let me share my screen real quick so you guys can see this. So this was her response. And she said, here's the thing, guys. It doesn't, and I've seen this make the rounds or whatever sometimes. Here's the thing, guys. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter when life begins. It doesn't matter whether a fetus is a human being or not. The entire argument is a red herring, a distraction, a subjective and unwinnable argument that could not matter less. I think those things are kind of important, but whatever. It doesn't matter whether we are talking about a fertilized egg or a fetus or a baby or a 5-year-old or a Nobel Peace Prize winning pediatric oncologist. Nobody has the right to use your body against your will, even to save their life or the life of another person. That's it. That's the argument. You cannot be forced to donate blood or marrow or organs, even though thousands die every year on waiting lists. They cannot even harvest your organs after your death without your explicit written pre-mortem permission. Denying women the right to abortion means we have less bodily autonomy than a corpse. So I didn't feel like writing out an essay to her in the comments, so I sent her a link to my article, which she didn't really read. So if I send you an opinion piece and it has all my opinions in it, I'm not gonna just debate all the points I would have just written and already did write an article. That's why I wrote the article, so I don't have to keep writing the same things over and over again. But so again, you can go read the argument against the narrative of force that I wrote. But to sum it up, well, first I'll say this is a good argument against vaccinations. any vaccination, period. If you really believe that no one has the right to force you to do something with your body against your will, then whether it's COVID or any other kind of virus that comes back with a vengeance, if you really believe that no one can use your body, even to get herd immunity and prevent the deaths of many people, to save a bunch of lives, no one can make you get any kind of jab. No one can make your kids get any kind of jab, period, whether it's killing your neighbor, killing your friends, killing your kids, killing your grandmas, etc. If this is what you believe, if this is your argument for abortion, then you really need to stick to your guns about bodily autonomy and say, no, I don't care if you're dying. You can't make me take this jab. And I mean things that are even more serious than COVID. Now, in reality, we know that they don't believe that because we are more than 2-3 years old, right? We remember what the pandemic was like, and they did coerce people to get the jab. They did lock people down. They called you grandma killers, etc. They believed, even knowing that the jab would not stop the spread, they still wanted you to take it. So any sort of argument that people had about bodily autonomy, just from the left, it's amazing to me that we entertain it at all, knowing the world that we lived in not too long ago at all. But there was a Supreme Court case back in the day that said that you have to take the jab, and it was like a conscription or whatever, like you had to pay a fine if you didn't. And I don't remember off the top of my head the name of the court case. It's an old court case, but it was a Supreme Court ruling. And they use that for the basis to build off of I guess eventually what we got with the different stuff with the jab. But the gist of the Supreme Court ruling is bodily autonomy isn't absolute when it comes to like people's lives, right? So just like bodily autonomy doesn't give you the right to go and purposely kill someone, because that is what's actually happening in the abortion. You don't have, according to them, bodily autonomy, you don't have absolute liberty in the matters when it comes to people dying. Like, they have to take other considerations there. So if you would agree with that at all, I don't understand why would you think that you'd have the right to have an abortion when that's deliberately killing someone. Because I had all kind of conversations about COVID and bodily autonomy and abortion throughout the pandemic, and people will say it's not the same. And I'm like, yeah, you're right, it's not the same. We're talking about maybe spreading the virus to someone else, and maybe they get sick, maybe they're fine, maybe they're asymptomatic, or maybe they do get sick and they pass away. These are hypotheticals. Like an abortion, that's a deliberate killing, and that's something that we could actually just stop. So why do you think that you have to shut down the whole world to stop these deaths from maybe occurring, if you can stop it at all? Because it is a virus. If you can really stop it with all these draconian measures, but you don't believe that we should say, hey, you cannot take this pill that will suffocate this child. You cannot rip them apart limb from limb. You can't suck up their guts. You can't crush their skull. You can't take those deliberate actions to do that thing. Or, people not being able to wrap their minds around that was crazy to me. It's also crazy when people mention guns, like, oh, you don't want to get rid of guns, though. Guns kill kids. I'm like, are you kidding me? Do abortions not kill kids? And people will say, it's not a kid. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's a woman's kid. If you want to look at definitions and stuff, yeah, sure it is. It's your offspring. It's humanless lives. You know, you can, and it doesn't matter. This thing said it doesn't matter if it's a baby, so we'll just call it a baby. A gun by itself is an inanimate object. It has no will of its own. It's not going to get up and just start shooting people and killing people, no matter what Alec Baldwin wants to tell you. You pull the trigger, someone dies, right? So that person with the tool is responsible there. That would be like saying we don't want to ban abortion, we want to ban forceps. No, we want to ban the actual action of the killing. We want the homicide to stop. I don't want kids to die, and you apparently don't want some kids to die. So there's common ground there. But I'd like to bring you across the aisle till we get to the point where I just don't want kids to die, to be killed. So there's that. So if you're so against guns because you want to save the lives of kids, I know you don't see that child the same if you rewound time back and they were in a womb. I guess you find it far less menacing when it's the mother who decides to off them, I guess. But I don't think they should be killed in in either circumstance. That's my position. But yeah, this doesn't make sense if you consider how the world was during COVID. Not at all, not in the least bit. I also said, and you can say, people will sometimes go like, well, no, it's really different though with pregnancy because they're actually in the body, using their body, etc. Well, nothing is going to be quite like pregnancy again because that is a natural biological process. Like even at the end, we're talking about harvesting the organs or making someone donate a kidney. No one is. There's not a court order to make you donate your uterus when you are pregnant. It's just happening. It's just happening because that's our biological process. It's how we reproduce, and we are not talking about a stranger. We're talking about your child. So it's really not the same. But if you really do believe that nobody has a right to use your body against your will, well, what about the things that are created with your body? What about the things that you earn with your body, like your money that's earned with your that's basically a representation of your labor, right? Money has value because we give it value. It represents something. And when you go to work for whatever amount of money that you work per those hours, and you get that paycheck, that is a representation of your labor that was obviously earned with your body, right? So if people confiscate that money, we'll call them the government, and they use it for something like universal health care to pay for a stranger's, I don't know, surgery or something like that. What if you're not okay with that? Or they use it for someone else's abortion. Like, what if you're not okay with that? If it's really survival of the fittest, then let that go down. But we do believe that we have some obligation to each other, especially if you're on the left. They believe we have all sorts of moral obligations to each other, especially if you're really rich. You have all kinds of obligations to people, right? So if that's what you believe, you have to make the case, and I think a darn good case, why a mother doesn't have a moral obligation to her child, to her baby. Because I was thinking about this earlier today. I thought about doing a skit. Because sometimes people will say, oh, you just want to punish women for having sex. Well, to me, it sounds like people want to punish babies for needing their mothers. That's the argument, is it not? Because they'll say, well, viability, if they can survive outside the womb. Okay, so they're vulnerable. They need their mother. That's why it's okay to kill them. Well, if they're outside of the womb, they still need some kind of care. They're like, well, someone else can take care of them. Okay. So again, you're punishing the baby because the baby needs their mother. That's the ideology. It's okay to not grant rights, not grant protection, to commit violence against the preborn because they are vulnerable and they need their mother. That's what this ideology is. Because these people don't really believe this person is not like a libertarian who just posted this. And usually it's not libertarians who I see really posting this stuff. It's usually folks on the left. A lot of these people do not believe this ethic. They don't. They don't believe that, hey, you can't take care of yourself, you're on your own. You see New York giving out cards to illegal aliens. Like, well, we have to do this because they're not eating the food that we're giving them. So they need these debit cards so they can go buy the food themselves and take care of their families. These people aren't supposed to be here. But they're like, well, we have a duty to take care of them. Okay. That's what they're saying, and that's what they believe, and they're really, really pushing. If you believe that's the case, I don't live in New York, so it's not my tax dollars. But you believe, I don't know, those people, their tax dollars who live in the city should be going to take care of strangers who don't even belong there. You believe that obligation exists. I think they should be all detained until they can have their hearing, but or remain in Mexico, what Trump had. But okay. Please explain to me why a mother doesn't have a moral duty, parental obligation, at least to not kill the baby for 9 months. Or at least, like, I don't know, 8 or something, till they can induce the baby and they likely survive. You just want to do it. And there's some women who, at the end of their term, they don't want to be a mother and they don't want their baby out in the world somewhere being raised by a stranger. I've heard women say that they don't want to put their baby up for adoption because for that exact reason. So some of these people, they just don't want the baby out there and they want them gone. And that's something I think women do willy-nilly. That's not what I'm saying. But just because you feel bad about it doesn't make wrong stuff okay. It doesn't. So anyway, let me answer this question. Wondering if you've ever considered running for office on the local or state level. If so, what position would you interest you the most? I actually have run for office before. I ran for state rep. And actually, my sister, who's watching, who's in the comments, she ran with me. Originally, they wanted me to run for a county commissioner. And like I was recruited by like people within the Republican Party. My sister was working for the Republican Party, my oldest sister at the time. And the Republican Party, well, I guess both parties or whatever, will try to recruit people to run in every seat, even unwinnable seats, because one, you don't want some kind of wacko to get in and be like, oh, this person's a white supremacist and they're running in the seat, and the Republicans are running this white supremacist, blah, 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 bad media. So you want to make sure that every seat, even though you can't win it, perhaps, you still have it filled, because at the end of the day, you want Republicans to be able to go to the ballot and vote for their person. And you never know, someone might, there might be a circumstance where you end up winning. So you want to make sure those seats are filled. And then you going out and campaigning for your spot also helps other people on the ticket. It helps the whole ticket. So they needed someone to run for county commissioner in my hometown. And so then someone else started talking about the numbers of like state rep, and they're like, technically it might be a more feasible kind of win if you ran for state rep. And so the more they talked about the state rep position, I thought that was interesting, especially if they thought it was a better chance of actually success. And so my sister Katrina was like, well, if you run, I'll run with you. So she actually ran for county commissioner, put her name on the ballot for that, and I ran for state rep. So I actually lost the primary by 6 votes. So it was very close with the primary. And so, and I ended up finding like 6 people who didn't vote. So it did sting. But that same year, like instantly, basically, someone I was at a church service in Ann Arbor, and I got a call from my sister, and she's like, okay, well, the person who was running for Congress in the 14th district is no longer here, by the way, because we lost population. So now there's just 13. But they're like, the person who dropped out for the 14th district, they need someone to run. And she had asked me before, could I put my name up? And I was just like, okay, sure. And so they're like, it looks like it's probably might be you. And I'm like, are you serious? So the committee, like the 14th district committee, would have to vote on me being the person. And so the day they actually voted for that person to be on the ballot, like who would be the person, I actually had to work that day. And so I just wrote a letter, and I had my sister speak on my behalf and read the letter. And the person who actually beat me in the primary, they had a candidate that they were going to put up. But after my letter was read and my sister spoke on my behalf, that person actually didn't vote for their person that they brought. They voted for me. So I was at work, and the chair of the Oakland County GOP, Republican GOP, came in with some other people, and they're like, congratulations. And I was just floored. So to answer your question, yes, I did run for local office. I ran for state rep and Congress in the same year. But by the time it was the congressional race, it was, I don't know, maybe like a little more than a month out of the election. And the 14th district was basically an 80-20 district. So, and I was part of the 20, not the 80. So that was a race that was pretty impossible to win. But I still went out there and I knocked doors and I made lit and I made commercials and I went to go speak. It was funny. The person who I ran against, that was the year that she ended up getting elected, but she she was trying to run, and she ran actually a couple races, and she was mayor of Southfield, Brenda Lawrence. And so when she finally won her primary, people didn't like see her. Like I went to this forum, and we were supposed to have a debate, which it was I think the League of Women Voters debate forum, which they are a left group, so it probably wouldn't have gone great if I did go, depending on like what kind of questions they asked. But she just didn't show, so I didn't end up even speaking at all. But which they were frustrated because they're like, she was all up on everywhere trying to get ahead while she was in the primary. But basically, after she won the primary, it was kind of like, what deuces, whatever. But hey, she knew she kind of pretty much had it in the bag at that point. I would go to places and speak and say, my spiel, and people be like, oh, I love you. I love you. I love you. And I'm like, I am a Republican. They'd be like, because I'd be speaking in a lot of Black areas. They're like staunchly Democrat. And, but they liked me. They liked me a lot. So, and I for an 80-20 district, I did okay. I guess the better question that you probably have now that you know that history on my part is, would I run again? And I don't have any plans to do so. And I appreciate the question, because I assume it's because you think I'm a common sense person who could do some good. But I feel like media is kind of where I like to focus that. And I like to encourage other people to be also common sense people, not afraid to speak up and talk to their neighbors and their friends and to make change in that sort of way. So I think there's all sorts of ways that we can be effective and make a difference. And there's all sorts of ways that God can use us. And if God leads me in that direction, I'm not going to say no if that's what the Lord wants. But do I have a desire to do that? I didn't have an extreme desire to do that when I did do it. Politics is just, it's so frustrating. And dealing with so many people who, I don't know, Congress just seems like such a joke a lot of the time. And people grandstanding, during the hearings, and people basically auditioning whether, when they get done with their stint, are they going to go to Fox or are they going to go to MSNBC? And I want to do something impactful, I guess. So I just not saying that I wouldn't try and or whatever and do my darndest to commit some real good, but I think the people would annoy me so much. But yeah, I think I'm doing what I believe that the Lord wants me to do, and if there's some kind of change in that, I will make change. But that being said, you did give the super chat. I appreciate you. When people do ask those questions, I'm like, again, I assume it's asked because they like what I do and they would like to see that done in another capacity, because they think I can do some good there. But you do obviously believe that I'm doing some good here. So let's just work together and pray, and let's get black tea up in the world and spread that influence there, and hopefully that'll be a good positive change, because some of these jokers in Congress I just don't know about. And another thing, I thought about doing a separate video to this, and I'm sorry for all the monologuing now, but I've been thinking a lot about my purpose in talking about these subjects and stuff, because sometimes, like we just talked about a huge segment on abortion, right? And people will say, oh, well, if we talk about that, oh, if we want this, if we advocate for this, it's going to be bad politically. And this is where the people are here in the country. That's where their minds are at. We have to make compromises. We're going to lose here. We're going to lose there, etc. And I understand what the goal of being elected is, and the politicians and compromises and other stuff that people have to make. That's not really my purpose right now. My purpose is trying to make that change, to impact society, to make a better decision. And so I don't want to run my podcast with the intention of, I'm going to say all these things, fashion it this particular way, because that's the best way I believe that Trump can get elected or something. I'm going to speak the truth. I'm going to speak in a way that is true to my convictions. I'm going to share things that are my opinion, but I always want to be true to my convictions. And I want to speak about how things ought to be. I want to report the news. I want to talk about the culture. Those things interest me, of course. And they're important for me to know. They're important for you to know. But I want to talk about how the world ought to be. And so when I talk about abortion, and as an example, I'm going to talk about the morality of it. I'm going to talk about how the world ought to be. I'm not going to pull my punches because of the electoral map. Because if someone doesn't say what needs to be said, then you won't eventually see the changes that need to be made. Like the abolitionists in the past, they needed to say the things that were true. They needed to say the things that were moral. William Wilberforce needed to say the things that were moral and true. And I will continue doing that. So that is my focus. So I believe right now I serve a different purpose than, I understand a politician kind of curbing what they have to say. It's kind of painful sometimes watching, for example, Ron DeSantis talk about the heartbeat bills. And I think he's proud to have signed a 6-week bill. But he always kind of, and it has a ton of exceptions, by the way, for people like 6 weeks is too, it has a lot of exceptions for different stuff, more than I would like. But you make a compromise where you can or whatever, or at least that's the ideology. I don't know if that's actually the best way to go about it, but we'll talk about that later. But he'll like when he was talking to Gavin Newsom, this is an extreme bill or whatever. And I'm like, why don't you mention all the exceptions that you have in it? But he didn't do that. And he'll just say like, life, we're life culture, etc. I'm proud to sign the heartbeat bill. So he just has this like little kind of stint that he'll talk about the subject, but won't talk a lot about the subject. And I think it's because really the position doesn't make sense. But that's kind of the best thing that they could do, because life starts at conception. That's when your human development starts. It doesn't start at the heartbeat. But that's, where they aim, and I think essentially they aim for it, knowing that they don't want the politics of calling a complete ban, but they want, realistically, a lot of women don't know that they're pregnant at that time. So I think it kind of tries to give them the best of both worlds. But as far as like a moral conviction, it doesn't really make sense. If you're saying life needs to be protected, life starts at conception, so we're going to have a heartbeat bill. So that's why I think he doesn't probably talk about it a ton or expound on it a lot, like in the debates. It was like, here's my little speech about it, but I'm not going to go too far into detail or whatever, because it doesn't make total sense. One commentator, like questioner, tried to kind of like nail him a little bit on it, and he didn't really justify the convictions of the 6 weeks, because I think they asked, like, do you believe life starts at conception? So why the 6 weeks? And he didn't really answer the question. He gave a fine political answer, but not one that really explained the ethics. And I think it's because you make decisions based on the politics of what you can get done sometimes. And I understand those compromises or whatever people have said that they've had to make, but that's just kind of not where I believe my platform is supposed to be right now. So same goes for like the presidential candidates or whatever. If Trump does something great, I'm always going to be like, oh, that was a good policy. I think there's policies he had before that we need to go back to, especially with the border stuff. Even if Trump is a nominee, if Trump does something that's dumb, or he says something that's bad, or he proposes some kind of bad policy, I might not be like throw him out or something, but I'm at least going to talk about it. And if people are like, no, you need to just give him ultimate praise because he's running, that's not how I plan to. If they want to pay me to run a campaign or something, to be on a ticket or something, not a ticket, but I'm not being paid by anyone to be rah rah rah. I'm speaking the news. I'm speaking things how I see them, and so that's what I'm gonna continue to do. So yeah, I have my ambitions for the platform is different than I'd have to operate in other circumstances. So that is a very long answer to your question, but I hope I answered it thoroughly. Someone said I'm too good of a person to go to politics. Thank you. Someone has to do it though. And it is nice when good people want to run. But sometimes when good people do run, you run into people who say that they're good and they're not so good. And they wear some people down. And I've got stories, but I'm gonna reserve them. I'm gonna move on, because I gotta talk about this before I let you go, even though I'm over. So Donald Trump, his lawyers and Colorado's lawyers went before the Supreme Court today to talk about the 14th Amendment and kicking them off the Colorado ballot. Now, everyone, I think, in their heart of hearts, knows that this is not going to work. Maybe there's people, Democrats, waiting in the wings, like, oh, that rogue court siding with Donald Trump. Maybe there's people waiting in the wings with that. That is not going to really happen for those people, because this might be like a 9-0 ruling. This could possibly end up being like a 9-0 ruling. So I was like listening to on TikTok, someone was like they were like live streaming it, and it was fascinating, the arguments, because they were just not hitting. They were really trying, but it seemed like even the Kagan was asking questions that didn't seem like it was going to end up being favorable to Colorado. Of course, Gorsuch at one point, Gorsuch seemed to be getting impatient with the lawyer, because he tried to make the case that when you commit insurrection, like instantly you were like barred from running. and like you lose that authority or whatever. And he's like, okay, well, if they commit insurrection, are you saying that the military like no longer has to follow the instructions from that? Like if they're the president and they committed something and like immediately they cannot like follow orders. And so he didn't want to like answer that question. Like Gorsuch had to keep asking that. And then at one point he tried to like make up a different analogy. He's like, nope, we're not going to a different analogy. He's like, I like to do that too, but please answer the question. And he asked it like 3-4 times with this guy. And so, because he's like, well, there'd have to be some kind of process or whatever. He's like, but you're making the case that is when they do it, when they commit the insurrection, not when they go through impeachment and are found guilty of impeachment or whatever, that basically they'd be disqualified. So if they can't really operate in the office, what's your argument for them not being able to just say we're not following the commander in chief anymore? So I didn't have like a snippet of that clip, but it was interesting. I'm like, they're going to town on this guy. And then Ketanji Brown Jackson had asked some questions where I didn't know where she was maybe going to land, but even she eventually like said stuff that kind of seemed like it was going to tank the case. So Greg Price posted on his Twitter a couple of clips, and let me play a few. Like, and Kagan really kind of highlighted that's going to be the big issue, why you're probably going to see a 9-0, other than the fact that they didn't really have a good case. But they do not want to basically say that one state can decide a presidential election, that one state can decide to take someone off the ballot and be like, oh, well, if it's close, if it's polling, is this whatever, they can just decide that this person is no longer to be running for president, and it will decide for the country who will end up taking the W. And if that's the case, like, why would they give them that power to do that? That's essentially what this ruling would, if they would end up going to their favor, they'd just be opening up a huge Pandora's box.
No, there has to be some process for determining those questions. And then the question becomes, does anything in the 14th Amendment say that only Congress can create that process? And Section 5 very clearly is not an exclusive provision. It says Congress shall have power.
But maybe put most boldly, I think that the question that you have to confront is why a single state should decide who gets to be president of the United States. In other words, this question of whether a former president is disqualified for insurrection to be president.
No, there has to be some process for determining those questions.
So yeah, that was Kagan. So that's a liberal justice there. We'll listen to a few Gorsuch clips, at least 2 Gorsuch clips that he has. I don't think he has the one that I just referenced, but and then we'll listen to this Ketanji clip that he posted.
That this court has held. You're not contesting this or asking us to revisit that decision in Thornton or term limits or whatever you want to call it, that it has to come from some federal constitutional authority.
No, we are not, Your Honor.
Okay. And here we're not talking about the qualifications clause, right? Nobody's talking about whether he's 35 years old or natural born, whatever, right? Not an issue, okay? We're talking about something under the 14th Amendment and Section 3. So that's where you have to find your authority, right?
We find our authority in Article 2, in states' plenary power to run their election.
Federal election, but this is for a federal office. It has to come from the Constitution, and you're seeking to enforce Section 3.
We're suggesting that in their broad power to determine them, to select presidential electors in any manner they see fit, they can take account of Section 3 and apply Section 3.
Could they do it without Section 3? Could they disqualify somebody for, on whatever basis they wanted outside of the qualifications clause?
That would run into term limits,
I would think so, right? So it has to come back to Section 3. And if that's true, how does that work given that Section 3 speaks about holding office, not who may run for office. It was a point Mr. Mitchell was making earlier, and I just wanted to give you a chance to respond to it, because it seems to me that you're asking to enforce in an election context a provision of the Constitution that speaks to holding office. So it's different than the qualifications clause, which is all about who can run and then serve. Yeah.
I don't know that it is different.
Okay.
Other qualifications for office similarly talk about eligibility for the office. There's nothing unconstitutional about a 30-year-old trying to get on the ballot.
Except for this disability can be removed, right, under Section 3. That's what's different about it. So thoughts on that?
So, yeah, they had a lot of good questions for him. Certainly. They just really didn't have the authority that they're arguing for.
3 speaks about disqualification from holding office. You say he is disqualified from holding office from the moment it happens.
Oh,
correct, but nevertheless,
okay. So I think this is a clip that I did already reference.
It operates. You say that there's no legislation necessary. I thought that was the whole theory of your case, and no procedure necessary. It happens automatically.
well, certainly you need a procedure in order to have any remedy to enforce the disqualification, which is different.
That's a whole separate question. That's the de facto doctrine. It doesn't work here. Okay, put that aside. He's disqualified from the moment, self-executing, done. And I would think that a person who would receive a direction from that person, the president, former president, in your view, would be free to act as he or she wishes without regard to that individual.
I don't think so, because I think, again, the de facto officer doctrine would nevertheless come into play to say this is
no de facto. That doesn't work, Mr. Murray, because de facto officer is to ratify the conduct that's done afterwards and insulate it from judicial review. Put that aside. I'm not going to say it again. Put it aside. Okay. I think Justice Alito's asking a very different question, a more pointed one, and more difficult one for you. I understand, but I think it deserves an answer. On your theory, would anything compel a lower official to obey an order from, in your view, the former president?
I'm imagining a situation where, for example, a former president was, a president was elected and they were 25 and they were ineligible to hold office, but nevertheless they were put into that office.
No, we're talking about Section 3. Please don't change the hypothetical, okay? Please don't change the hypothetical. I know I like doing it too, but please don't do it, okay?
Well, the point I'm trying to make is
he's disqualified from the moment he committed an insurrection, whoever it is, whichever party, that happens. Boom, it happened. What would compel, and I'm not going to say it again, so just try and answer the question. If you don't have an answer, fair enough, we'll move on. What would compel a lower official to obey an order from that individual?
Because ultimately we have statutes and rules.
Yeah, so he got pretty bodied in that segment. On a side note, I really think Gorsuch has a really nice voice.
From rising again.
He could probably narrate the Bible or something. But anyway.
From rising again in the context of these sort of local elections as opposed to focusing on the presidency.
Well, 2 points on that, Justice Jackson. First is that, as I discussed earlier, there isn't the same history of states regulating ballot access at this time. So ballot access rules to restrict presidential candidates wouldn't have existed. They wouldn't have been raised one way or another.
Right, but I'm not making a distinction between ballot access and anything else.
Understood, but the more broad point I want to make is that what is very clear from the history is that the framers were concerned about charismatic rebels who might rise through the ranks up to and including the presidency of the United States.
But then why didn't they put the word president in the very enumerated list in Section 3? The thing that really is troubling to me is I totally understand your argument, but they were listing people that were barred and president is not there. And so I guess that just makes me worry that maybe they weren't focusing on the president. And for example, the fact that electors of vice president and president are there suggests that really what they thought was, if we're worried about the charismatic person, we're going to bar insurrectionist electors, and therefore that person is never going to rise.
This came up in the debates in Congress over Section 3, where Reverdy Johnson said, why haven't you included president and vice president in the language? And Senator Morrill responds, we have. Look at the language, any office under the United States.
Yes, but doesn't that at least suggest ambiguity? And this sort of ties into Justice Kavanaugh's point. In other words, we had a person right there at the time saying what I'm saying. The language here doesn't seem to include president. Why is that? And so if there's an ambiguity, why would we construe it to, as Justice Kavanaugh pointed out, against democracy?
Well, Reverdy Johnson came back and agreed with that reading. Any office is clear. The Constitution says about 20 times.
No, I'm not going to that. So let me just say, so your point is that there's no ambiguity. With having a list and not having president in it, with having a history that suggests that they were really focused on local concerns in the South, with this.
Yeah. So when I heard that part, I was like, because I heard Kagan say stuff. I'm like, okay, well, she'll probably side with them. And I start Ketanji, how she questioned some of the Trump lawyer stuff. I'm like, I don't know about her. But after that, I was like, okay, well, she's this might be a 9-0. Some people, I guess, suspected maybe Sotomayor might, whatever. But I don't know. After like hearing some different analysts talk about it, they think that the court's probably going to do a firm smackdown of Colorado, which they should. This should have never happened. This is a huge blight on the court making this crazy decision. And the justices also pointed out, like, the ramifications if they do decide in the favor is like, obviously other states will try to do the same thing with other candidates for reasons that they deem whatever. So this is a crazy sort of thing that they're doing. It's amazing to me. Like, you can dislike so many things that perhaps Trump did or his rhetoric, or think that he's such a, I don't know, threat. But what really also concerns me, though, are the steps that people take to try to stop him. And it's like, you can't see that you guys are crossing a threshold, like a point of no return, and you think he's so awful that you just give yourself any kind of excuse to do the crazy things. Like the lawyer tried to kind of say, like, oh, well, this insurrection, the Capitol's never been attacked since, like, I forget what year he claimed, but that wasn't even true. And he's like, but this is so different. And they're like, okay, but you saying like this stuff with Trump is so almost unprecedented. But impeachment wasn't something that we really did. There's like 100-year history, like between the time when they did it and then they did it with Clinton. So if there's all that history there, and since the time with Clinton, like past couple years, we've had a couple. Trump had 2. So since now impeachment is like something that's more common, you can't just say like, oh, it's something that probably won't happen. This is a special circumstance, when people might go ahead and just radically start doing this, especially if people can see it's a political tit for tat. So you're asking the court to make some radical rulings that would just really, really change the landscape of the country in a negative direction. And I understand he had to represent Colorado. The man had to do his job, but crazy, crazy case. Shame on Colorado for this decision. Anyway, thank you guys for joining me today. Looking at the Sotomayor comment here. She's doing the, don't you think this looks tired routine in the media right now? She'll vote however the establishment tells her to. I'm sure they really want a unanimous decision or whatever. It could be 9-1. I mean, not 9-1, 8-1, 7-2, but it could be 9-0. It really could be. We'll see. Anyway, thank you guys for joining me. Please go blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation on the Black Tea News website, black like the color, tea like the drink, because it does cost a streaming on my website, all that stuff. Make sure you guys check out different merch that's available at the store. that you guys can nab to support in that kind of way if you would like. And then you get like cool stuff. So you can go ahead and check out the store. You guys can check out my different books that I have written as well. I have 17, 2 are nonfiction. Which one of the nonfiction books is, of course, God is Blatantly Against Abortion. So I recommend you guys check that out. It talks about rights and science and politics and all kinds of different stuff on top of theology. So it's a good read for the topic overall. But if you are mildly religious at all, it'll really help you as well. So thank you guys, and have a great day.